Welcome to the Antimatter radio show, live from West Lafayette, Indiana at a new time, 4 p.m. Eastern. This is our new time. We're starting a little bit late today, just because we're getting things organized for the new time. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. And on this show, I can assure you we won't have any Michael Jackson coverage. That's for sure. With the mainstream media, if any of you still pay attention to it, can take up all of your mind with Michael Jackson coverage, but you won't get that here. Here on this show, we're going to get to the bottom of things as best as we can humanly possibly do, because there's a whole lot going on that the mass of humanity is not aware of. It's written down in our religions and in some few books of our scientists have written, and some other writers, but in general, the mass of humanity doesn't know what's going on and who they are, what makes up their consciousness, and so forth. Basically, the humanity is living in roughly a prison grid, even though they don't know that. The mass of humanity is told that they're free humans, and so they therefore believe it. But if you ask them in any given day if they're doing what they want to do, they'll typically say, no, we're not doing what we want to do. We're doing what we have to do. We're doing what somebody else is instructing us to do, what somebody else is informing us to do. For example, they will be working at a job that they don't like, or they will be on, if you're, in some more slavish nation than even ours is, such as, or maybe the whole continent of Africa has several such nations, unfortunately, and South America as well, Mexico. You have more of a plantation sort of existence, and those people may not understand that that's not how humans are supposed to live. And here, we're Americans over here, we think that we have a good life, but we don't understand that most of our life is composed of doing what others tell us to do instead of doing what is good for us and freeing our souls and using meditation to expand our consciousness and to become what we truly are, which is happiness. That's what a human is at their inner deepest core, is happiness. Many people would laugh at that comment because they simply don't understand what that means. They think what a human is, hands and feet and a body and so forth. That's exactly not what a person is, as we've discussed on past shows. But back to the issue that I want to talk about here right off the bat, discussing how human beings are living in a global slave grid, if they know it or not, where humans are the slaves who have been taught to think that they're free, as I discussed in my first book, Corporatism, extensively. Humans are working around the globe 12 to 15-hour days, typically, not with their families, often in situations where the pay is not enough to give a person satisfactory living conditions. Satisfactory living conditions mean conditions which are adequate for survival, and survival means safe survival. Okay, so if you do not have enough money to buy adequate food, such as good, healthy, organic food, instead you have to buy this toxic junk at a grocery store, or you don't have time to grow your own food in your yard because you don't have land that you're given to do that on, or you don't have the skills because nobody's handed them down to you, or because you simply are having to do other things like work at a job that you don't necessarily like so much. In those cases, humans are not free, and they're also living such that they cannot grow food that is safe for them, and therefore that is not a survival situation. That's a situation of where you're putting oneself in harm. Okay, so those are not adequate living conditions. Okay, adequate living conditions, as I just said, are those where we can survive, and very few humans on planet Earth are in such conditions. Now, many humans just get by, of course, and then sticking on the steam of food, we acquire diseases like the epidemic of diabetes or tuberculosis or cancer and so forth that are going on worldwide. For example, 50% of men over 50 develop prostate cancer, and 50% of women over 50 develop breast cancer. That's not how it's always been. If you trace back to earlier times, there's a book called The Nazi War on Cancer. I forgot who the author is. It was put out by Princeton University Press a few years back. It's an excellent book just on that historical era with the Nazis and their their response to cancer. Of course, the Nazis did what they did, so you probably know what a lot of the book's about. But it has some interesting things in there, especially early in the book, in pages 20 through 30, how it discusses the Eskimos, for example. I guess that's supposedly a politically correct term now, but oh well, I can't keep track, and of course don't mean it to be politically incorrect, so anyways, I'm just going to keep using that term. The Eskimos, Inuit, Native Americans who live in the very northern polar regions, when they were first contacted by white settlers in the 1800s and the early 1900s, they did not have a lot of the ailments that whites had, white European settlers, that is, such as cancer. And this really baffled a lot of Europeans at the time, and they started to call cancer a disease of civilization because if you were civilized rather than primitive, you had this disease of cancer. Of course, a lot of you think I'm using derogatory terms. You think, oh, primitive, I shouldn't say one group is civilized and one is primitive. Well, you need to undo your programming because somebody just told you that that's what those terms mean. I actually mean civilized is the derogatory term and primitive is the complimentary term. Okay, all of us humans are primitivist. That means that we have a wild soul and a deep, fiery consciousness. Okay, it's uncivilized. It's primitive. It's alive and full of life. Okay, the civilized soul is the one that's dead. Okay, so on this show, basically you have to deprogram yourself and undo all of your cultural training that you've been given. Start over, start fresh, clean slate. And the clean slate that we're talking about is this living, fiery spirit and soul that you have that is you. It's in you and it is you. It's what you are. You're not your body. You're this fiery soul. So anyways, back to the topic at hand here that I'm just casually talking about at the moment. The issue with having adequate means of survival and humans not having that on our planet shows how well humans can be trained to believe that what they've been told is true rather than what they can see with their eyes is true. So, for example, humans can see their living conditions. They can see that they spend the great amount of their days working in conditions which are not adequate. They're not the way our ancestors often lived, for example. And they're deplorable in many cases. For example, get on a plane and go over to the Far East and see the labor camps that the humans who work in the Nike shoe factories, well, they're not really factories, they're sort of just slave camps. These are not conditions that people should be living in during their workday and in their when they go home at night. When they go home at night, it's more or less just a prison camp that they live in. And this is very common, this kind of living worldwide. And we Americans don't know that because we Americans, unfortunately, watch TV, and that's how we learn about our world, and so therefore we don't know about this kind of stuff. And we think that everything looks like America, and that's how it's normal to live that way. Well, it's not normal to live that way, and history is quite a nightmare. And it shows that the standard state for humans to live in is not their true state, which is this inner soulful happiness that I was just discussing, but our state that we've lived in as humans for the last hundreds and thousands of years. That's hundreds and thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands, I said. It could be hundreds of thousands, but that's another issue which I can discuss later. It shows that our state that we've been living in is one of slavery. Okay, we are humans who do not get to choose what our thoughts are. We are humans who don't get to choose what our actions are. We don't get to choose to live in satisfactory conditions for survival. We don't get to choose where our food comes from. Okay, we only have, you can think, oh yeah, I can choose this grocery store or that. But what if I said you can't choose from a grocery store and you want to choose from a fresh garden and just go pick your food? Many of you can't do that. Okay, that's the point I'm getting at. So these are conditions that we humans live in on this planet, and it shows that we are in a system, a slave system, and that makes you wonder who's controlling this slave system. And I'm not exactly sure who's controlling the slave system. We can see some of these groups that are these so-called untouchables, such as the people in the Federal Reserve and the IMF and the World Trade Organization, some of the more covert groups in the United Nations, and all these groups work together. The CIA, a lot of high secretive military groups, and so forth. But you wonder who's controlling them. And all of our religions discuss how there are other groups of beings in existence other than humans. And on past shows, we've discussed how there's really no reason to think that humans are all there is, especially when we've got all these fossils, like the Cro-Magnon man fossil that we discussed, I think 2 weeks ago it was, and also the conehead skulls. That's one of the most fascinating things we've ever discussed on this show, all over museums in South America and Greece and so forth, and you can't get an anthropologist here in America to even talk about them, amazingly. So you wonder if there's an advanced race, since we have these fossil evidence for groups with larger brains than us. And then if you analyze the way this prison grid system works, it's very masterful how it works. It's a system where humans can be put in slave conditions and tricked into believing that they're free. You have to wonder if humans could have developed this or not. Maybe they could have. It's certainly possible. But the system gets so masterful when you learn about it as much as I have. The group that's running it has deep knowledge of human psychology, more than the typical human even knows about themselves. There's several reasons why that's the case. I won't go into them now. But it's mysterious to think of who exactly is behind all of this prison grid system that we live in. It's definitely worth discussing more, but I want to move to a different topic for a moment. I'd like to just announce that my new book, Telementation, that's Telementation, Telementation, is out on Amazon. It's out all over. I think it's going into bookstores all over the place. That depends on how well it sells, of course. Telementation is a certain kind of meditation which is related to what people call the law of attraction, and it's sort of the law of attraction mixed with Zen, Soto Zen Buddhism is what the book is really about. And the book in itself is sort of an instruction manual for meditation. It's a little bit, I don't know, it's hard to describe, really. I think it's really one of a kind. But a lot of you are familiar with that very famous book, The Secret, which is about the law of attraction. It's about those topics roughly, but it's also quite different than that book. It's more of an instruction manual on how to carry out the law of attraction. The law of attraction is what people often describe as being the base of human consciousness, and the base of human consciousness is such that reality is created by human consciousness. In other words, the world that you live in is composed by your consciousness, whether you know that that's what is going on or not. As we've talked about in past shows, consciousness creates reality, is the simplest way to put it. That's an old Buddhist and Eastern philosophy concept, and it's verifiable that that's the nature of reality. So if that's true, then the goal is to create consciousness in a way that is most appealing to what you want your reality to be like. You structure your consciousness such that it brings forth the reality that you want to exist. So a lot of the books out there on the law of attraction, on telementation, describe it as if it's just unbelievably easy, and it takes no effort, and it's just absolutely simple to carry out, and you're almost crazy if you can't learn it in 3 minutes. A lot of you who are familiar with this literature in this area of study know that that's how people describe it. That's not really true, though. People are describing it that way probably because they've practiced it and gotten quite good at telementation, the law of attraction, and therefore it's easy to them at this point. But they have to think back that it probably took them some time to learn it, and that's where specifically my book comes in. And Telementation is sort of an art form. You need to it is easy when you learn how to do it. It is effortless, and it is a religious experience. It is a religious meditation, a religious practice. It is the base of all psychology, all consciousness, and religion, and science. But due to the fact that humans on our planet have been raised to think that they've been raised to not understand what telementation is, that it even exists, or that something so special could compose what they are. We've been trained to think that it doesn't exist. So there's the trick, and we have to learn how to do it because we've been taught how to not do it. So we have to formulate our consciousness in order to act spontaneously, which is to carry out telementation. More simply put, we've been trained as humans to live in a cultural system, but and that cultural system inhibits our natural, spontaneous way of life. So what we need to do as humans is to relearn to live genuinely, and that's where meditation, religious practice, things such as farming and art and so forth come in, and telementation is the core of all that. So this book, Telementation, the subtitle of the book is Cosmic Feeling and the Law of Attraction. It's published by Tree of Life Books out of California, and I'm quite excited about this book. To be honest with you, when I just open up pages of it and just read it, it just makes me feel good. The book is very peaceful, and it almost makes you feel like if you take the time to learn this technique of the law of attraction, of what I call telementation in this book, by the specific instructions I give in this book, it's almost like it makes you feel everything's going to be just okay. There's any worry you have about the future can be taken care of. You can structure your future to be not only safe and okay, but further, it can be fantastic. It can be filled with tremendous happiness and satisfaction, fulfillment, and profundity. The book is just a beacon of incredible hope. That's one thing that the writers of the book, The Secret, I think really put well. They call telementation the secret because it's a good name for it, because nobody knows that it exists. It's the core of what we are. It composes our lives, who we are. It's our soul, but we don't even know it. That's just fantastic that they named it that. Wonderful. So, but they said The Secret, the telementation, is the next human revolution, and I could not agree more. They're exactly right. All we need to do is get this information to people, and not just the fact that consciousness creates reality, and it's easy, and it's what's been going on all along, and you can change your consciousness to therefore change reality how you want it to be. But we need to give them the specific instructions of how to do this technique, this meditation, this spontaneous soul work of telementation. And that my book, it's a very short, inexpensive book. It's $12 on Amazon now, but once it gets rolling on Amazon and sells a bit, they'll have that discount, so it could even be 10 or 11 pretty quickly. So once that gets into people's minds globally, this can create an utter revolution. People just have to know how to do telementation. They have to know what they're doing. You can't just jump into it. For specific reasons I give in my book. I mean, it's hard to get into some of what I'm talking about right now without giving a long discussion of what telementation is, so I'm probably going to bypass that. But the point, I can't emphasize enough that it's very important that people know, given simple step-by-step instructions on how to carry it out. I think some of the existing literature does not do that. And again, that's where my book comes in. I'm just really excited about it. I'm glad that the dedication of the book is to all humans who are trying to awaken from what's sometimes called the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is just what you can call the ego, what Zen philosophers or Jungian psychologists often call the egotistical consciousness. That's the fake consciousness, the false self. That's the surface personality, the not real self. The real self is a religious beacon of light, a spiritual core. And remember on this show, the word religion means spirituality. Okay, people get so hung up on that word. Well, you need to stop getting hung up on that word. That word has meant something way back into the times of the Hindu yogis, religio, and it's gotten a bad flavor because of academics lately have tried to couple religion with war and so forth. Wars and so forth through history have been caused by the New World Order, which has existed on this earth for thousands of years. That's why you have war. That's why you have poverty. That's why you have false flag terrorism. That's why you have suffering and genetically modified crops and ignorance and people who don't know. That's why you have the secret, okay? You have the base of consciousness not known to people. So, but anyways, the humans are trying to awaken from the dark night of the soul. We're all scrambling around trying to acquire happiness, and we often take on false ways of trying to acquire happiness, such as television and these pathetic churches that we have all over our nation, which are not even biblical. They're just little social gatherings to make everybody wants to make themselves feel good and be told what they want to hear about how there's no problems and their ignorant, pathetic life is okay. It's okay to live like that. That's fine. Everybody else is doing it, so it's fine. You can be ignorant and work at a job and forget your family, work at a job that you hate, ignore your family throughout the week, and watch TV instead of talk to your children and eat ridiculous food that lowers your spirituality and your consciousness and makes your body unhealthy. That's all okay. Everybody else is doing it, and you can go to church and be told that it's all okay. They'll give you a 20-minute sermon on basically nothing. Now, some of you probably think I'm being a little harsh. I really don't care, because it's exactly what's going on. These churches are a disgrace all over the place. They're as my friend Alex Jones so carefully and nicely points out, these churches are controlled by the government. Okay, there is no separation of church and state. There's a form that he's discussed that ministers nationwide have to. I asked my own minister my wife and I go to a church here in West Lafayette, Indiana, and I asked my minister. I think it's called the 501c3 form. I said, "Is there a form that you have to sign, an IRS form, to control certain things that you say on the pulpit and don't say, certain topics you can and can't discuss, and you have to sign a form saying you'll do that? And when they do that, they'll not demand you to pay taxes, illegal taxes." And he said, absolutely. He told me all about it. And that was pretty interesting when he told me about that. There is no separation of church and state. These churches, they're not only controlled by the government, but also they're controlled by the mass media. The way that works is everybody's attention in America. I've got a book coming out in a couple weeks called The Telescreen, published by Progressive Press. It's all about what I'm about to discuss in the next couple minutes here, right now, over the next couple minutes. And here's the way it works. Humans watch television, okay? That's, the TV experience is a more powerful experience. Your consciousness is more impressed upon than, for example, when you're working at your boring job, okay? So therefore, if your consciousness is more impressed upon during the TV time than the work time, that means that during your work time, you're going to be sitting there thinking about what you saw on TV. You'll still be thinking about it from the night before. And then you'll see everybody in their offices talking about, oh, did you see this TV show? Did you see that TV show? And everybody talks about that. And rather than get in a long discussion of this, I think all of you could. I've got a 200-page book coming out about this topic, so I won't give you all the details on it now. But you probably can see how this works. Okay, everybody's drawing their attention to the mass media, so therefore the mass media's got us. It's got your consciousness. It's putting the images into your mind. Therefore, it's creating your mind, because your mind is largely made up of images. Your mind is made up of things like images, feeling, and some other things which we can discuss on other shows. We should do that sometime. So that's how it works. I mean, all you need to do is have everybody focusing their attention on this thing, which is I call the telescreen world. There's mass media everywhere: internet, music, iPod, billboards, logos on clothes, television, signs, mall displays. Everything is media. It's a media world. We don't have forests and trees and birds and sky and jaguars, and we don't have a shamanic existence. What we have is a mall, M-A-L-L existence. Okay, that the mall existence has replaced the shamanic existence that is innate in us, that is spontaneous in all of us. If all of us could escape, or could be thrown out of the telescreen world and put into small groups in, say, forest settings, significant numbers of us, in a matter of time, if we were thrown in those settings and given just minimal skills to live, like our ancestors did, significant percentages of us would transform into shamanic humans. Now, when I say transform, that's probably not the right way to put it. We would become what we already are. It's just covered in us. Our true self would be unleashed. Okay, we would start to feel all of existence around us. We would start to have great expansion in our knowledge. We might have visions of certain things, such as I've discussed on past shows. We might have instincts and intuitions, which turn out to be verifiable, and as if the mind is greater than the five senses. It's as if we're knowing things that we aren't supposed to know. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story right now on this. This is just utterly fantastic story. Changing topics. Here's how consciousness works. I've had in my life the last 2 weeks a very large set of circumstances in my personal life going on. Nothing bad, just, when you really want something and you have a lot of hope for it, and you sit there and think, I hope I get it. I hope I get that house. I hope I get that car. I hope I get that girl or whatever. I've had a situation like that with something that my wife and I are seeking to acquire, and it's been very up and down with how that's gone over the last 2 weeks, and extremely up and down. And things would happen behind the scenes, and then my wife and I would find out about them, and as things moved up and down with this certain thing that we're trying to acquire for our lives, something would be very special to us, something that many couples try to acquire for their families. So, but anyways, I would notice that we'd be, my wife and I would be in the evening talking, and then one evening I would feel really negative, like, wow, we're not gonna get this specific thing in question, and just out of nowhere, all of a sudden, these negative feelings would come to me, and I would say, no, and then I would try to do some telementation to change that, and the feelings were so powerful, and my telementation wasn't strong enough. I wasn't doing much intense enough meditation with specifically trying to target those feelings, that those feelings overpowered me. And then the next day I would find out, with this specific thing we were trying to acquire, if you're following me, something negative happened, and it started to slip from our grasp. Then a couple days would go by in this up and down roller coaster we've been going on the last 2 weeks, and all of a sudden I would have these great feelings, like everything's going to be okay. We're going to get this item, blah blah blah. And then I would find out the next day things happened in the last couple days to really make it look good, like we're going to get these. I get this item for us. Okay, so if you're following me, I was just having feelings about what was going on outside of my five senses. Okay, I would be here in my home, and something would happen at another location with respect to this item that we were trying to acquire, and I would sort of sense it, not sense it with the five senses, sense it in a larger way. So the mind is bigger than the five senses. There's no question. The reason I notice this is because I'm always looking inward, because I'm a Buddhist, meditating daily, and I practice telementation. These things require you to continually look inward, to introspect, to meditate. So therefore you start to take great notice of what your consciousness is doing, rather than just not notice it at all, as the typical human, unfortunately, is doing. And what would happen is I would find I was sensing what was going on in some other locations, miles and miles away, without my five senses. Okay, if you're following, let me get on to the point here. The point is that this is miraculous. This is the real nature of our consciousness. Any of you listening need to do is start to just focus on doing meditation, doing telementational meditation, doing Christian mysticism or Zen Buddhism. All these force you to, or I should say prompt you to look inwardly, and you find out that your consciousness is very powerful. It knows a whole lot of things that you didn't know you knew, and you just didn't know that your consciousness was aware of all this knowledge because you weren't paying attention to what your consciousness was doing. You were continually looking outside of yourself, away from your consciousness. You're looking at the TV, you're looking at the mall, you're looking at this and at that, and ignoring your deep inner mechanics. Okay, so this is the real nature, like the ancient Hindu mystics used to teach. Well, they still do, but back in the early days when they started to teach this, your consciousness, actually, this is its true nature. It's parapsychological. It's sometimes people call parapsychology ESP. This is the real nature of who we are now. It's sad because in our culture we have channels like the Discovery Channel who put hour-long shows on in prime time, with titles like this. Does ESP exist? As the title is telling you, well, nobody knows if it exists. Gee, I wonder if it does. Okay, now, so that gets in everybody's mind that it doesn't exist, and see, that is doubly powerful because we live in this culture where nobody's looking inwardly. It's not a meditative, contemplative culture. It's an outward culture. We are always looking at our TVs. It's a telescreen world, as I was just describing. So we're not really paying attention to our inner mechanics, our inner subjective spirituality that makes us all up. And so therefore we don't understand what we actually are, and that this is the true nature of things. So we can have this crazy false idea that the mind is just a sort of somewhat insignificant byproduct of biology, and really all it does is just creates feelings and images and some thoughts here and there. And but that is actually that's really just mostly the ego domain, mostly the false self, the personality as it's called. And the true self is this more spiritual core, which is parapsychological, telementational, which has this incredible power. Consciousness is an entity. Nobody knows what it's exactly made of. Nobody knows what the stuff is that composes it. Nobody knows what its mechanics are, what its pieces are, how it works. Okay, it appears that trying to think, how does consciousness work? What are its pieces? What is the stuff that makes it up? It appears that those questions don't even make any sense. Those are more concepts for a lower mental state, an ego mental state. It appears that's thinking of things in a block-like fashion. Like thinking that consciousness is like Tinker Toys. I mean, in our world of the physical, that the egotistical human lives within, in other words, the average American lives within every day, we see things in a block-like fashion. We see, things have solidity and surface and extension and magnitude, and everything's like blocks, and you can stack them on top of each other, and they bump into each other, and they have contact and so forth. So therefore, since we see everything in those physical terms, we start to think that that's the only kind of stuff that exists, and everything must be described in those terms, and that's certainly a bad assumption. Okay, because consciousness is direct verification. All of you can look directly in yourself and have direct verification that is not. There's an entity right there that you can have direct experience of, which is you, your consciousness, your soul, your fiery spiritual self, that does not fit these descriptions. There's not a block-like physical mechanistic entity. Okay, it's of another technology. It's of another order of magnitude. It's another reality compared to the realm of the physical that many of you have probably thought erroneously is what is. I mean, and you can see this in churches too. People will start to describe things like heaven in terms of this, like it's a super Walmart or something. All they know is the mall reality, the physical world, and therefore they think that, if heaven exists, it must just be kind of like that, except somewhere else and without pain or something like that. I mean, it's very, very, it's pathetic if people are going to think that way. Okay, so consciousness is it may be that, as Walter Cruttenden describes in his book Lost Stars, a book I've talked about on almost every show on here. It's a book all of you, I really think you need to buy and read. I mean, I don't have any relationship to him or something. I'm not trying to sell his book. I'll talk to him someday, I'm sure, but that book has deeply impacted me. And he describes in that book, the different ages, like the golden ages through time and the dark ages and so forth, and then we're kind of in a bronze age or something now. And he describes the technologies of the high ages as being meditation. And that is exactly what I'm getting at in my book, Telementation. True, technology is, I guess, maybe one crude way to define technology is human will trying to manipulate the world with tools. Okay? That's actually probably a pretty good definition, maybe. Now, that's what telementation is. The tool here is meditation. The human will is telementation, the consciousness, and the tool is meditation. You get deep into that with the meditative tool, meditation. You get deep into your consciousness and you twist it around and you change it to how you want, and therefore reality will follow. Reality will be shaped in that way in return. So, therefore, you can either, a lot of people in the law of attraction circles will say things like, you shouldn't try to create reality with effort. You should try to create reality with consciousness. And that's exactly right. There was one time I shocked some students once when I was back still teaching college in my Eastern Religions class at Purdue University. I said to some students one time, I play basketball every day and shoot baskets out in my driveway almost nightly. And I was discussing that once, and I said to these students, I don't shoot the ball with my hands. I shoot the ball with my mind. And I wasn't kidding. I just blurted that out spontaneously. I wasn't even thinking about when I said it. And I just said it to them, and that they found that interesting. And because it's true, that's telementation. The physical, egotistical existence makes you believe that you're shooting the ball with your hands, and it's how you move your hands and so forth that makes the ball go into the hoop. But the higher understanding of reality, of consciousness, is such that it's your consciousness that is moving the ball into the hoop. Okay, so it takes practice. So when you first start playing basketball, you'll think in your mind, I'm not any good, I'll never make it, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, what do? You can't even hit the backboard. Okay? That's because you think you can't hit the backboard. Your consciousness is creating a situation where you're very, very poor at it. Okay? And then if you practice, you start to, through time, think, I'm a little bit better, and what a surprise. Not really. Your consciousness has created a situation where you start to make more and more shots. And then when you're LeBron James, King James as they often call him, I agree, you can make anything. You can sink anything, and you dominate. You are a master. You see that confidence that in the last stage there that exudes? That's what consciousness does. Consciousness creates a situation of where you can do anything. Okay, it's just we've been taught that reality is a physical existence, a material existence. But this show is called the Antimatter radio show, and we're against materiality, against physicality, because there's simply no evidence that it exists. Now, you may look out through your eyes out at the world and see all these patches of color and surface in front of you. For example, I'm looking at a computer screen. I can reach out and touch it, and I'm doing it right now. And it sure does feel real and seem real. But that's just in one mental state, okay? And that's just according to one idea of science. Okay, if I start to study quantum physics, the study of the energy that makes up reality, I start to find out that that science is a different kind of science. It tells us that all this physicality is an illusion, okay? And if I practice meditation and this inwardism, I find out also that this physicality is less. I find out that behind and within this physicality is another reality which I previously did not see, and which now I see since I'm practicing the telementation, the meditation. And I see it's everywhere, and I see that it's more real than the physical, than the material. And I also see other things. This is what I used to tell my Eastern religion students. When I am living according to only thinking the material is real, that's called the egotistical consciousness, or the false self, the personality. That reality is associated with struggle, pain, unhappiness, and hardship. And when I do the telementation work, when I practice the meditation, when I rise to the more true self, I find out that there's this other reality in and behind all things. It was there all along, I just didn't see it. On a deeper level of me, I knew it was there, but now I have direct conscious experience of it. And I find that that second reality, you can call it what you want. You can call it the astral light. You can call it maybe Satori. That's a little, I want to be careful using that term. That's a Buddhist term. You find out that that is not associated with struggle and unhappiness. You find out that that reality that was previously unseen is associated with ecstasy, with satisfaction, with genuineness, with no exaggeration, with effortlessness, with peace, with kindness towards others, and feelings of love towards others, rather than feelings of needless competition. I mean, I'm not saying competition is bad, but I mean, often we use it with spite. We use it with hate, rather than using it with. You can be competitive, but have feelings of love towards those you compete with. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, you need to connect more with the higher self that is really what you are to know what I mean. Okay, so this reality, which the quantum physicists have finally started discussing over the past 100 years, but which was discussed by the religions for thousands of years. In Christianity, they call it the Holy Spirit, or light, similar to Gnosticism. In Buddhism, they call it nirvana. In Hinduism, they call it Brahman. The ancient shamans may call it the life force. I have called it abstract atomism in some academic work that I've done. And it is a product of meditation where you come in direct awareness of this light, this astral light that's everywhere. And you find that it's as if you knew it was there. It's like you remember rather than you discover that it's there. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden you discover that it's there. No, it's as if you're remembering, as if you're saying, oh yeah, I knew this was there all along, but I'm just now remembering that it was there. And you have this feeling when you're at this state of the state of awareness that you are who you really are supposed to be. For some reason, these feelings just and these bits of knowledge come with you in these states, and it's as if you think, oh, this is what I was all along. This is who I am. Because probably a lot of people in the egotistical state walk through their everyday lives, if they even think about this, probably thinking, this isn't who I am. This isn't, I feel dissatisfied. This isn't what my life and my consciousness really is. This isn't really what I'm all about. Well, you have the opposite when you carry on this other kind of life, this telementational life, this meditational life, the spiritual existence, which is the real life, the real existence. And it is, as the people who wrote The Secret say, it is the next human revolution. Because more and more people are finding out about telementation, about the law of attraction. And it is exactly what people need. It's sad that there's a lot of fundamentalist Christians out there saying it's evil and so forth, because I quote right in my book, Telementation, I quote Jesus in the book. He talks all about it too. He says you can move, with your faith, you can move a mountain. And there's other passages too, several. So this is the core of religious teaching. I mean, the Hindus and the Buddhists have, for millennia, talked about how the consciousness is the engine of things. So it's a imperative issue for all of us to figure this out, because without this, our lives become a disaster. They become struggle. And we only know that struggle, and we think that that's normal. We think that that's the way people are supposed to live. There's no other way to live. And you have to understand that there's a group of people or entities, as we discussed at the beginning of this show, that control human consciousness, who control the egotistical human. Okay, but they do not control the inner spiritual core. The inner spiritual core that we discussed, I often call it in my university lectures, I used to call it the feeling mass. And I have a book on lulu.com. I think it's called, I'm pulling it off my shelf here right now, I think it's called Miscellaneous Writings. Yeah, I think in there, let me see if this is true. Miscellaneous, let's see. Yeah, the second chapter, Religions of the East, Introduction to Religions of the East. And the third chapter, Buddhist Compassion. Those are all about this feeling mass, the inner spiritual existence. The inner spiritual existence is innately free. By its very nature, it is a free entity. And it cannot be imprisoned. It is not bound by the body. It is of another higher order of existence than material and bodily existence. Just like the religions have been telling us all along. All of you can learn this now, today, or this coming week, if you just learn how to do telementation, as I discuss in my new book. If you learn how to do Christian mysticism or Zen Buddhism. These are not difficult. These are really, the only difficult part of these is you need to, as Yoda said, and I actually have this quote in my book, Telementation, you have to unlearn what you have learned. That's the difficult part. We have to scrape away all the false teachings we've been given by culture through the years in our lives and learn our spiritual existence. Well, we'll talk about this more next week on the Antimatter radio show at this new time. We'll start at 4 p.m. Eastern next week. And thank you all for listening. And I look forward to talking to you next week.